Okay, great. So we've got about 65 people in the room so far. We're going to kick off now. Welcome to the Integrated Innovation Network's Virtual Hub. My name's Siobhan Curran and I'm the manager of the University of Newcastle's Integrated Innovation Network, or I2N. The I2N is really all about boosting economic growth and diversity through entrepreneurship and innovation in the Hunter region. And we fuel the success of those innovators and entrepreneurs regardless of their affiliation to the university, and help them build really great ventures by connecting them to the four things we know they need: community, coaching, customers and capital. And we do this through our innovation hubs and programs. So the I2N manages two co-working spaces, I2N Hub Hunter Street and I2N Hub Williamtown, with the hub at Honeysuckle scheduled to open around this time next year. We offer a range of programs developed to cover 5 stages of venture growth, from enterprise skill development all the way through to incubation for established startups and scale-ups. So normally we'd be delivering our monthly event startup stories at one of our 2 hubs, but times have changed and here we are gathered virtually. I guess in terms of delivering an acknowledgement of country, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm located, which is the Awabakal and Worimi people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. You can also show your respect and awareness of country from where you're joining us by letting us know in the chat function at the bottom of your screen where you're from. And that chat function is also where you can connect and comment with other attendees. So we've taken a number of questions from attendees at registration. So thanks to those that did offer up a question. And we'll be leading with those after our speaker provides a brief background on their startup journey. And then we'll open up to any questions that have been asked via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So you can also upvote questions too. So if we have time for those, we will get to them as well. I guess one good thing about virtual events is that I don't need to point you to the bathrooms or the fire exits. If you're working from home or in the office, you should already know the drill. So without any further ado, I'm now going to introduce our speaker today. Our guest is Professor Alex Zelinsky AO. He is a highly respected scientist specialising in robotics and computer vision. He is widely recognised as an innovator in human-machine interaction. Professor Zelinsky also leads the University of Newcastle as our Vice-Chancellor and President, and has enjoyed a career that spans 30 years in research, innovation and entrepreneurship. In June 2000, Alex spun out seeing machines from a robotics lab at the Australian National University. The company is dedicated to the commercialisation of computer vision systems and is fitted in thousands of off-road heavy mining vehicles, on-road heavy trucks and some regular production cars. So Seeing Machines itself has won customers such as Caterpillar, Boeing and Takata, and the technology is protecting drivers around the world. And the company was also the first in Canberra to be listed on a foreign stock exchange. Alex himself has won numerous national and international awards, including the Clooney's Ross Medal for Successful Innovation, the Trevor Pearcey Medal for Distinguished Lifetime Achievement, the MA Sargent Medal by Engineers Australia, and was recognised by the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer. He is an elected fellow of the Australian Academy of Science and the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering, the Institution of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and the Institute of Engineers Australia. And he was appointed the Officer of the Order of Australia, an AO, in 2017. I need to take a big deep breath there. A huge career. So welcome, Alex, and thank you so much for taking time to join us at Startup Stories today. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Siobhan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today at your virtual event, and thank you for the introduction. It was way too long, much too there. But the important point is I'll take your point there about acknowledging the traditional owners, and I also acknowledge the traditional owners and elders past and present. So thank you. And look, I know we don't have a lot of time, so let me kick off with a short little presentation of about 7 or 8 slides, and which will sort of just track the journey of the company, some lessons I think we learned along the way, and then we can get into the Q&A. So let me kick off. So hopefully the screen is going to come up and I can get it into the share mode. Is it coming up, Siobhan?
Not just yet.
No? Try again. Let me try to share the screen again. What's happened? Ah, there it is. Okay.
That's it.
That's it? We got it?
It's just coming up now.
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, as I said, so this is a story like share with you about a company I co-founded with 3 colleagues from the Australian National University, Tim Edwards, Sebastian Rajour, and Jochen Heinzmann. I was a professor academic there. Tim was our research engineer, Jochen was a PhD student, and Sebastian was a postdoc. So it's quite a spread of skills, I think, which is quite important, I think, to the success of the company. But let's kick on with the, see if we get this to move along. What's happened here? I've got multiple screens, get it to move. When we tested this, Siobhan, it all worked, right?
It's always the way, isn't it?
It's just, for some reason, it's just not. Let me try again. Over on this side, maybe over here, maybe it'll work.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
I'll see if I can advance it. There we go. And so this is a little bit of a timeline here of the company. So it's been around now for a while. So we started research originally in 1998 and at the ANU in a research lab. The key was to really do research that was, I'd say, world leading in the sense that it was unique intellectual property. A lot of people work in important areas, and when you go to a university, quite often you see people showing you similar technologies, but you're never really sure which technology is the most advanced of its kind at that time. We were actually working at that time. I was leading a laboratory. We were very interested in self-driving cars. And one of the things we wanted to do was monitor drivers to make sure that the drivers were interacting safely with the vehicle. And we found that technology was quite world leading in its own. So what we developed, there was no one else had at the time. And while other people were working on cars that could steer on the road, there'd been a lot of that kind of work going on, but that wasn't clear to potential investors or supporters. And Volvo, who are very interested in car safety systems, they were sponsored us from Sweden to do this work. And then they said, look, we think you could probably, there's some competitive advantage to this. And in 2000, if you can think back that far, it was the .com era. The internet was really taking off. It was a bit of a tech boom on, and we decided it was a good time to spin off the company. And we spun the company off and then started and developed a product very quickly. It wasn't straight. Our dream was that we'd have products in the automobiles, like in Volvos. Ultimately, that was the idea. And it took us. We knew we couldn't jump straight into that, so we had to develop products along the way, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But along the way, we needed to raise money, and back in those days, it's very hard to raise capital in Australia for high-tech startups. We'd been offered quite a bit of capital to go to Silicon Valley, but none of us at the time wanted to move to relocate the company there. We had family issues. Some of us were married, and we didn't want to go. And so we didn't move the company. And in the end, we were able to get a listing on the London Stock Exchange on the AIM, which was an AIM board, which is really around high technology companies. And we were able to sell a story about we already had some sales and a big upside, and that led the company to be initially listed. And then there was a lot of ups and downs with technology over the years. And ultimately, in 2018, it's the last bit on the timeline here, the company was doing over 30 million in sales around the world. and is the world leader in its field. And just last year, I was pleased to see that Austrade has the Export Awards, and Seeing Machines won the high technology category and as Australia's best exporter. So it's fantastic to see that. So it was only 20 years to be an overnight success. But moving on, a little bit about the technology. Hopefully this video will play. I'll get it to play here, and you could just gives you an idea what it is. It's basically tracking a video and being able to see where a person's looking. So that's very important. You'll be able to tell whether the person's got their eyes on the road, particularly for, say, big heavy mining vehicles, etc. So you could actually detect if a person's potentially falling asleep and can avoid accidents. And we were able to show that. So I said some of the key factors were you had to have technology which was the best. That's, I think, an important thing rather than just a Me Too technology competing on some other ground. So we also, as I said, had a well-balanced team of founders. I was originally the CEO. My other colleagues did other parts in the company, other jobs, and we all were able to, as we built the team up, we were able to lead in various ways. We also used a spin-off model that was from Stanford. If you look at Stanford University, there's a lot of companies that spun out from them, and Stanford doesn't take a very big position in them, but still has some small interests in them to get the interest, to get the companies supported or moving out of the university. In other words, in Australia at the time, we had a situation which is not like it is today, and certainly where the university wanted to take the majority shareholding or control the company. And generally, public entities trying to control private entities isn't a very successful way of doing innovation. So we argued to ANU at the time they should follow the Stanford model, and I think that was an important thing. We had Volvo as a shareholder, so that told the world that we had a major company backing us, and it helped attract other investors. And we did end up having, even though I was the CEO then initially, but we have had another 4 CEOs in that over that 20 years, and we had a very good industry board that was able to provide good leadership to the company. Interesting, we never ended up doing venture capital. We started off using high worth individuals and the connections such as Volvo, etc. Volvo put a little bit of money in, as did the ANU initially, just to get the company moving, and we were able to then get it moving. And in the end, we used also government schemes. State government and federal government had quite a number of individuals' innovation schemes, and they've evolved over time. And unfortunately, I think at the moment we don't really have good innovation support schemes at the moment. Although, to be truthful, we do now have much more venture capital available, so maybe government doesn't have to do as much as it had to do back then. But nevertheless, I think government needs to be supporting innovation. And I think we have had stop and start goes. I think with Malcolm Turnbull just a few years ago, we looked like we were going to get onto that innovation journey, and again, it stalled recently. And look, I think the other important point is that whenever you start a company, it's got to have a strategy to be commercial. In other words, to make money. You've got to show that you can actually generate revenue. If you'll never generate revenue and from at all, then it's a very hard sell to say how will this stand on its own feet and how will the company wash its own face. And I guess the other point was we learned very quickly to be endpoint focused. Initially, when we built the technology, we just imagined people would want what we were building, and in some cases, so it was all just tech push and not market pull. And then we found out the customers wanted a particular type of features and things like that. So we started to listen very much closer to it, and that led to refinements of the technology and the product. And as I said, public listing on the London Stock Exchange then made us public and allowed others to join in, and we did multiple rounds of more capital raisings over the years. And so one of the big products that was developed was this product called Guardian, and it was able to literally be put into trucks around the world, and particularly in the mining industry initially, but also now long haul trucks. And it's the sort of #1 sort of safety product that it's used. So it invariably, while it tracks the driver, can give a warning there, but it's actually linked into fleet management systems, so people can actually monitor the fleet at a distance and saying this truck driver or this truck is actually exhibiting some unusual behaviours, or the driver appears to be fatigued, and they can just intervene and stop the car and ask the person to pull over. And that was quite a successful product. It's one of the important things about any of these type of products is they've got to be fully automatic. So this thing would actually work for any driver 24/7, night or day, whether they were wearing eyeglasses or no eyeglasses. And it was, as I said, detected inattention or persons exhibiting fatigue. And the key lessons around this was that it was a product that we've started off with an aftermarket solution. So rather than say, look, we want to build this into new cars, that's a very hard thing to do. We tried to do that initially. That was our dream. Back in 2003, we thought we could just put into new cars, and we quickly learned that the product was just way too expensive, and we had to get it down to hundreds of dollars rather than thousands of dollars. And so the strategy was to develop an aftermarket solution for initially mining vehicles, and then road transport ultimately. But we used off-the-shelf products, and then we were able to get the product out and then innovate it and get it down in cost. And it in the end led to a product being built into the 2018 Cadillac. So in the end, that vision we had nearly took 20 years to get there, but it's now a product in the Cadillac, and this next 12 months it'll actually appear in some luxury European models and in Japanese car models as a standard product. So now it's actually on the way of being adopted. So that sounds like a great success, which it was in the end, but there was also other ones we tried to do which were less successful. One of the useful bits of the technology was that we could, you can see create a 3D effect. So if you knew where the face and eyes were, you could actually control the display. We actually in the end developed a display which allowed, I can't show it to you here, but it gives you a 3D effect without actually having 3D glasses. When you go to the cinemas, you wear those. We were able to do that without the 3D glasses. Now what's happened? There we go. And so we were able to, in the end, develop a laptop with Toshiba. It was used for game planning. So it was the world's first 3D laptop, which without needing any eyeglasses. So you literally sit down and you could watch a movie, do anything in full 3D. An amazing piece of technology, but it was a flop in the sense of a commercial flop, in the sense that we weren't able to get market share. And at the time in 2011, the iPad really took off. People were not really buying high-powered laptops anymore, and really people, I don't think 3D as a technology has really taken off. You can think of people going to the cinemas and wearing 3D glasses. It really hasn't become a feature. So so interesting, while we had the technology, we worked with produced a consumer product, it wasn't a success. So sometimes things you learn from, you can't predict the actual outcome, but you have to take the risk. So I just move on to sort of summarize the lessons learned. Here we go. Oops, sorry, go back one. And look, it's all about having, I think, with these sort of companies, you've got to have a vision that is about what you want to do. We wanted to change the world with creating technologies that could observe people and then change the way people interact with machines. So, and you have to be resourced for success. In other words, it's got to be able to harness resources, and resources don't always have to be cash. And I've always said that technology firstly has to be feasible. In other words, you can make the technology so it actually exists. So, but there's also needs to be desirable. People need to use it, want to use it, a bit like that. I just gave that example with the 3D presentation around 3D displays. And at the end of the day, that it's can actually, there's valuable. In other words, there's business model. You can actually make money from it. Sometimes you've got people want certain technology and they want to use it, but there's no way to monetize it. So that doesn't work either. So you've got to get all those three lined up. And the other important thing is the whole company, you know, it now employs 200-300, we'll have 300 people, is it's you need a commitment to talent and to people and develop them. And the important thing is, anything I've learned is you can't do anything on your own. It's all about teamwork, collaboration, and working together. And really being really hard on yourself about performance management. If you're trying to build a company that's going to compete against the world out of Australia, you have to be fair dinkum about performance in every way. How is the company performing? How are individuals performing? How's the team performing? And at the end of the day, last bit is that, you know, I've never seen anything succeed through poor leadership. So you really do need good leaders all through the company. And as leaders have a lifespan. You know, I worked in the company for nearly 10 years in various roles, 4 or 5 years as a CEO. But then in the end, I stepped back and became a board member. And even then, a few years ago now, 4 years ago, I've stepped away from being the board. So I'm just a shareholder. And you just have to know where your position is, and the idea that everybody needs to bring the best people to the table to work. And I think that's where I'm going to finish up, Siobhan, so we can actually, there's a bit of a Larson cartoon there, but a bit of a joke. Some of you might remember Gary Larson. He was a great cartoonist from the almost last century even. But anyway, back to you, Siobhan.
Thanks so much, Alex. Let me just see if I can stop the share.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, it doesn't seem to be working for me right now. As I said, we did test it before and it worked, but it doesn't seem to be working now. Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate that really super quick overview of what you said was 20 years of an overnight success, which is typical, I guess, of a lot of startups and scale-ups. We're going to now look at some of those questions that were asked by our attendees on their registration. And I thought a really great place for us to start is for the emerging entrepreneurs and innovators that are with us today. One of the questions that was asked by Bridget Lawrence, who's a student at the University of Newcastle, was, looking back at your startup journey, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay, younger self. Look, I think that when I started seeing machines, I think I was already a professor at the ANU in 2000. So I was 40 years old, and I probably could have started something 10 years earlier, I think. I just didn't think I could, or it was the right thing to do for me at the time. I was just thought that you'd have to have all these extra special skills. So there's a lot of bit of unawareness of what could be done. And the thing that actually changed my mind is I remember we bought because we were in a robotics lab, we bought some robotic equipment from the US. It was a kind of cutting edge robot, and we cost several $100,000. It cost me, for grants, as we were very much looking forward to it, and we started using it, and it broke. And it was built by an MIT startup company from MIT, which we thought were, the gods of the technology. And then we unpacked the robot because they couldn't really support it, or when I say unpack, and disassemble the control boxes, and we saw some really ordinary engineering. It was really built badly. So, and we actually spent the summer rebuilding it, and then we realized, so why are we buying these technologies? Maybe we could do our own and start our own companies. Because if those guys, these Americans, are selling technology like this, it's they're just having a go. And so that's what we did. So that inspired me, because I just felt that somehow I had this idea that to have a company, you had to have really out of this world technology and products. And you've got to have a out of this world dream, but then you start trying to, and I think Australians are very well trained in universities, and we can take on the world. Should have done it earlier. That's my advice.
So the idea of backing yourself.
Yeah. Actually, Siobhan, you might want to try to, I think I unshared the screen there. So see if that works.
Yeah, we've got it recording, so you're on Spotlight now. So
okay, is that working? Okay,
yep.
Good.
So a sort of really good follow-on question to that is from Jordan Johnson, and he's wondering about you as an engineer. You've had an exceptional career across business, defence and academia. What advice would you have specifically for young engineers?
Well, look, I think was it Jordan, was it?
That's right.
Yeah, Jordan, so good question. Look, I think go back to that sort of idea that I think I've made that point. You've got to think big. And I'd say find the biggest problem or challenge you can find, and then try to solve it. You know, so stretch yourself, and and when you've done that, you'll probably find you could actually do something even more bolder. So that's what I think I would advise people. Rather than do things which are comfortable, find something which is really hard, but you think is feasible, right? So it has to be. It's not like saying create a time machine, which we can't, which is basically impossible if you believe in laws of physics. So you focus on technology, but something which is feasible, but it's really, really hard to do. And you take on that challenge, solve it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We've got another question here from Zoe, and I'm going to mispronounce her surname. She's from HMRI. Her question is, what advice would you give to PhD students who dream of taking their ideas to industry, but don't know where to start?
So where to start? So, well, look, I think, the first place to start is always to go to organisations like your own, Siobhan. We've got a lot of now startup clubs or places where the innovation hubs exist just about in every university, and also a lot of city councils support them. So I think first thing I'd advise is start hanging out with people who are like-minded. And that's a good place to start. And then through those, you then tap into networks. And I think that's where you start. And also, I think if you're looking with your own research, I always say that your research should have an end user. If you really solve the problem you're working on, there should be some beneficiary at the end. Who is that beneficiary? And it might be a doctor or a nurse or maybe an accountant, depending what sort of technology you're working on. Go talk to those people. And when you start talking to the end user, you start to understand what their needs are, and then you can actually hopefully develop the solution to their problem. And ultimately, they can then guide you into these industry networks.
And I'd just like to flag there too that some of the programs that we offer at the I2N are specifically with that idea in mind. So our Navigator program is targeted at people exactly like PhDs that want to engage more with industry to understand what their impact potential is. So please check out those details on our website. I think Richard will post a link to that page. So I'd highly encourage any PhDs out there that want to find out their impact potential to participate within that program.
Yeah. And look, also, I think we should probably give, I don't know if Darren Cundy's on the line, but Darren's our new Director of Knowledge Transfer and Commercialisation. So he's used to work at CSIRO, then worked quite some years at the University of Tasmania, done a lot of technology transfer, startups, etc. So Darren's very passionate about this, and we've hired him for that reason to help drive innovation in the Hunter and the Central Coast. So, yeah, so I think Darren will be, I'm sure, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he'd be delighted to interact with folks. Yeah,
he's absolutely already plugging Newcastle Innovation in the chat. So yes. I would like to maybe focus on some sort of leadership and strategy questions that we've received. One is from Connor Brown, who works in our Office of Alumni and Philanthropy, and he asks, what lessons have you learnt from your experience that you would like to instill in your staff at the university? And I guess this could probably broadly be defined as really any company.
Mm.
What experiences have you learned that, or what have you learned from your experiences that you would like to instill in staff?
That's a good question. Look, I'd probably say anything you should do, you should start with the end in mind. Whatever you're doing, there's got to be an end point. That, be it even if you're preparing a course to teach, who is it directed to? What will be the value, the impact, if that is the course does a really good thing? Or if you're doing research, what problem are you solving for whom, and the end point? And ultimately, we should be thinking, how do I get this particular technology or solution that I'm working in the hands of the end user, that they could use it? For example, I know that people now in the university are talking about developing a COVID-19 test kit. So there's a lack of test kits out there, and the testing is very cumbersome. So great, if you could develop a new testing kit, okay, that's the research, but how would you actually get it in the hands of the frontline users? So you have to think about, how would you manufacture it, how would you distribute it, how would it be configured to allow people to use it, etc. So that's the sort of thing. Just doing the research on its own, I'm working on a test kit, well, that's not the answer. You've got to actually think of the translation of the path. I used to when we were at CSRO, we used to call it the path to impact. And I think that's something we all should have in mind.
That's great. A lot of the researchers, we've had a lot of research teams go through pre-accelerator and accelerator programs to really determine what that, idea to impact is of the research that they're doing, and had some really great success in being able to either develop out some intellectual property that they can commercialize as a result of that, and really thinking about that end user is just so key. Another question we've got is from Michelle Williams, who's joining us from James Cook University. She asks, how can we remove some of the barriers for research groups to commercialise their work and then use these funds for more research projects?
That's a good question, Michelle. I think barriers are only, they're actually, what's the word? They're artificial. They only exist sometimes. Barriers. There can be barriers in the university. Some of them are cultural, and that's again leadership. I think getting people who've been experienced, who've had track records of success, having them as part of the team always helps, because they know what success looks like and how you can get things done in a way that will facilitate research and innovation. I think, as I said, I talked about the ANU. At the time we were spinning off our company, Seeing Machines, they had, I would call, unrealistic policies. They thought that they should own 90% of the company, and they would control it and all the rest of it. And the question we said to them also, who in the university would know how to be a director in this company and control this company? And it was very clear that there was no one really. So really the university needed to be a minority shareholder, and really appoint a director to represent them who had actually had true commercial experience. And that's just an example, and there's many, and the world has moved on from there, and we've got to be thinking about how do you encourage people to take these risks in the end, to leave the university, to try to have a go at doing something. And maybe we have to have generous policies of people can take leave without pay and go off and do something, and then be able, if it doesn't work out, be able to come back and share and learn from their experiences.
I think a lot's changed in universities, particularly in Australia, in how they support academic staff to be able to commercialise any intellectual property that they may develop. And I'd just like to point to a question actually that's been asked in the chat, which aligns perfectly to the example you gave with ANU. And it's by Darren Cundy, our new Director of Knowledge Exchange and Enterprise. He's asking, how did ANU assist your startup on its journey to financial sustainability? What lessons do you think are most relevant for you on as it considers its role in supporting entrepreneurs?
Look, I think the ANU was, it was new ground. I think what I would say that the ANU was able to do was to be, in the end, be flexible. you know, in the sense that it actually said they realized that they didn't know how to do startups. And they actually said, well, look, this is our policy. We pointed out it was wrong. It was inappropriate. We're pointing to the US. We want to be more like that. So they actually were willing to adapt to the situation. I think that's what, you know, I'd like Newcastle University to do as well, is to, as we, you know, we've got a set of policies. If they're not fit for purpose, we've got to change them. And that will come from, you know, staff, students saying, look, we can't be successful unless you change some of these policies. And the idea, I think, is, but now I think it's very different, Darren, to what it was 20 years ago. We didn't have people like you or Siobhan or others who've had some experiences in working in the innovation space and have actually done successful deals and seen startups succeed. So it's one of the hardest things to do, I think, is help a new company, or is to have the right leaders in place. There's not a lot of expertise in Australia at the CEO level to run high-tech startups. It's a very small group. And, you know, when I'm talking, there's not people who desire to do that. There's probably people you ask them, can they run, but have they actually had the experience of success or failure or both and know how to do that? We have a very small cohort. So we've got to try to build that up and support and nurture those people. And likewise for directors of companies, etc., who have actually worked, because we have very much a resource-based economy, not a technology-based economy. And so it's got, our leaders and company directors have got experiences in those industries like resources, services, but not necessarily technology. And look, the reason I'm saying all startups need to be technology ones, but technology is ones which give you a competitive advantage. And the companies that, you know, create the greatest value, I will say, actually technology based. And have a look at the biggest companies in the world today and what is their intellectual property base. It's mainly around IT and being applied to various industries. So I think we need to be looking in that space. I think Australia's got a lot of competitive advantage. I think our medical research is outstanding, but we're very poor at translating it into dollar outcomes. Where's the medical industry in Australia? Where's the medical devices industry in Australia? And I think we need to do more there. There's a lot of opportunity there. And that's where I'd like to see our university try to succeed in helping try to build up industry, because ultimately it's industry that employs people.
Mm. You've really piqued a lot of interest we've got at I2N about, you know, building this pipeline of, you know, entrepreneurially savvy or enterprise skill driven and focused students who will then go on to be our graduates and our employers or employees of the future. And that kind of ties into a couple of questions that the attendees have asked. One's by Robert Scanlon. He's a University of Newcastle student, and he's saying scientists are more often focused on the theory of their work than transforming it into a product. Is there, and I would argue actually that some students are really focused on just getting their degree to get a job. He's asking, are there any tips for encouraging entrepreneurialism?
Sorry, Siobhan, I think, could you ask that question again? It went through a whole bunch of jittering. So
no problem. So,
okay, say that again.
Robert Scanlon's asking, scientists are more often focused on the theory of their work than transforming it into a product. Do you have any tips for encouraging entrepreneurialism?
All right, look, actually, I'll probably give the repeat of the answer I gave earlier. Start with the end in mind. I mean, if you work, even if theory will be useful if it's directed to solving the right problems. You don't actually have to come up with a practical solution, but you've got to really understand where you're driving things to. So who would be the ultimate beneficiary of your work? And if you start to, and maybe sometimes it can take 20 years or 30 years to translate basic theory into applied research. But if you're on that track and helping advance knowledge along the way, it's nothing wrong with following your passion. But I always say, who is going to benefit from this, or what will benefit? Maybe it's environmental science, it's the planet, you know, you're going to save the planet. Great. I love people who want to do that and solve the climate change problems. But what would it be? How would you do it? And be thinking on those lines. So always start with the end in mind.
That's a really great point you make from an individual level, if we can move on maybe to thinking about Newcastle and the Hunter region and maybe even Australia's position in this space, we've got a great question from Liam Potter, who's from an organisation called New Tech People. They're responsible for a great podcast that highlights people working in tech in Newcastle. His question is, Newcastle's historically been a good place for R&D and innovation, but things can always be better. What does Newcastle need to take it to the next level?
Well, look, I think these sort of forums are great, and wanting people to take risks. I mean, it's great to see that there's a company I met just recently. Just his CEO's name, Adam. Anyway, is Pegasus.
Oh, okay.
Pegasus.
Pegasus.
Pegasus, and they're a company that attracted, I think, $28 million of venture capital from Silicon Valley.
Yes.
And Silicon Valley is investing the monies directly into Pegasus here in Newcastle. I think they've employed about 120 people, and now I think Adam was saying that they might double in size over the next few years if things go well for them. And that's great. And they want to work with the university, see whether there's ways we can provide them with future workforce, as well as potentially look at training people in the skill set that they've got a platform for HR, work health and safety. So great, they came out of the mining industry, but great example of what can be happening. So the idea that you have to leave the Hunter to relocate your company, that's what we were faced with Seeing Machines, but in the end stayed in Canberra because we felt that the Canberra needed to have a high-tech industry hub and move away from government, being a government town. And I think we can do the same here. I mean, here you've got a world-leading software company for HR, which is Solutions, or it's broader than that, but based in the Hunter, and can be done. So that's one example. Just another one, we've got a company just recently, James Murray Parks, who's the director, as the CEO of the company, Technotia, have relocated onto the Callaghan campus. They're taking space here, and they've just hired 3 of our PhD students, and they're also, I think, sponsoring PhD students, which is great. And they've been one of the companies that have been were asked by the Victorian government to develop ventilators for the COVID, and they've come up with some couple of new designs, aspects to make ventilators even more efficient and cheaper. So they're a very successful company. James used to live in Victoria, but loves the Hunter. Bought a house recently in the Hunter on one of our beaches. Loves it up here, so he's setting up his business here and wants to employ our graduates and set up an R&D lab, which will go to and take product to the world. We want more of that, and we will do everything we can to encourage people to do that.
That's fantastic news. There's some really great examples of universities that are really, they're not setting up their science parks kilometres away from where their main campuses are. They're setting them up now within the main campus. So you've got this really great mix of industry on campus doing exactly what you say, hiring our PhD students and work integrated learning students, and being an active member on campus. This kind of then feeds into a question that's been asked by Gary Jones from Fledge Innovation Labs. He asks, how is the university engaging with industry to provide the best work integrated learning opportunities for students?
How? Well, we are reaching out to industry. So there's 2 things. That one of the things we're mandating, Gary, is that every undergraduate student at the University of Newcastle will have work integrated learning experience, a practical one. So they have to go out into industry or the community or into government and have that experience as part of their degree program. And that means there's 2-way interactions. There's us reaching out to various partners, and we're forming those relationships, but also asking industry and or other partners to put their hand up and saying, hey, we'd love to have some students here working with us. And so it's a 2-way street, and we're picking it up. In some areas, it's already kind of working very well. For example, in health and medicine, every nurse, every doctor gets work integrated learning. It's just part of their training, as do our teachers. Teacher education is also done. But in the other areas, such as business and law, less so. science less so. So we've got some areas of the university which is not really part of that raison d'etre that your degree requires you to do that kind of interaction, and we don't think that the interaction doesn't have to be just with industry; it can be with non-profits, community groups. It's the idea is to get us interacting with the community and business.
We've got some startups at our hubs who have taken on work integrated learning students, and that's been a really great opportunity for them to sort of vet potential future employees. Yep. And those students have gone on to become some of the first employees of those startups, which has been really great to see as well.
Indeed. And that's in fact exactly what we did at Seeing Machines. All our first 12 hires were straight out of lab. The people had done an honours degree with us in engineering, and we just hired them and offered them jobs. So yeah, many of them are still there.
Hot tip for the students listening in: if you want a foot in the door, it's easy to do at a startup. One question we've got from Holly Stringer at Dantia, which is Lake Macquarie Council's economic development arm, is asking, do you have any thoughts on innovation and sovereign manufacturing in our region?
Well, I think we should look, so some sort of capabilities are sometimes required. I think too often if you just say, where can you get the lowest price, and the lowest price happens to be in China or some other country, and that's your one supplier, and any way the supply chain gets disrupted, you find it's very difficult. So I think Australia hasn't really looked at its supply chains and then understanding what are the things we need to make sure are made in Australia. And we did that in my previous job when I worked in defence. We looked at that and decided that Australia needed a sovereign shipbuilding industry. We decided, we looked at aircraft and things like that and said there's no way we could build jet fighters like the F-35, but we could supply parts to the F-35, and those parts were provided, built locally, but supplied to the global F-35 fleet, not just to the 75 Australia's going to buy. There's about 3,000 F-35s going to be manufactured over the next 10, 20 years. So that it means Australian companies are not only supplying Australian F-35s, but globally. And likewise, we then looked at manufacturing. We manufactured, and the decision was to build submarines in Australia, not get another country to build them. And that built up, it's going to build a high-tech workforce. And because Australia needs submarines to guarantee its maritime pathways. We're a trading nation. Everything that we depend on, or our nation's wealth, is generated by shipping things out and shipping things in. So you need, it was a strategic competitive advantage. So looking at the Hunter, there may be other things to look at as well there. And we are a global energy hub currently for coal, but there's no reason why we couldn't move to hydrogen, for example, which could be derived from coal using ideas such as that. So I think we've got to be making sure if there's things we need to do locally to make sure there's supply chains are guaranteed, but also to be thinking globally that those products we build aren't just good old-fashioned protectionism. It's an Australian product, you have to buy it, and it's got to be actually competitive. There's a bit of an example of that. We used to have this company in Bendigo, used to make the slouch hat for the army, and it cost a fortune. And the idea is, should it be allowed to be made somewhere else? And in the end, it was made with somewhere else, but we used to make a small order with them just in case that other supply chain ever dried up. But you can't just have people who are inefficient to say, well, I'm an Australian manufacturer in something that Australia may need, and then be propped up with inefficient operations.
I like that idea.
So I think we've got to have... Yeah, exactly. So the idea is you've got to have competitive advantage, and it's got to be relevant globally.
We've got some specific questions for you about Seeing Machines. One of them comes from Matthew Ford, who's from Phillips Ormond Fitzpatrick law firm. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the future of companies like Seeing Machines given the move to autonomous vehicles and the current economic climate?
Yeah, look, I think autonomous vehicles, is one of those technology hype things. I've got an idea that, it's the same. It's no different to commercial planes. Would anyone get onto a commercial airliner with no pilot? I mean, they've got a lot of autopilot features in the aircraft, but I don't think anyone would get onto an aircraft without a pilot in there. You need humans to supervise the planes. Cars are no different. And this idea that there's this faith in technology that it's 100% reliable, 100% time, it's not. You can make it, so what it means is autonomous cars will kill people ultimately. Now, you might say that they might kill people less than the average driver or something like that, but okay, so you're better than the worst driver, but what you really want is a technology which is better than the best driver. And the way technology best works is humans and machines working together. You take the advantage of people looking over or supervising technology, and then being able to take over when necessary, while the low-level functions or mundane functions can be done by a machine. So I actually think that you do need technology where people are monitored and work together in a symbiotic way. If you look at every single prediction that Elon Musk has made about autonomous driving cars, they're all false. He hasn't made any of them. I'm willing to take bets with anyone there won't be autonomous cars for the next 20 years. Fully autonomous, no driver, no interaction at all. You will need humans in the loop. Sorry, not in the loop, humans on the loop. In the loop is when you're driving, but humans on the loop will be required. So that means you need technology like Seeing Machine produces.
That's a really great segue to another question that's related to computer vision. And this is by Cameron Moore. He's asking, what area of computer vision has improved the most since the beginning of your career?
Look, there's always interesting things with technology, continually advances. One of the things that has really made the technology move ahead has been the advances in hardware. Computers are faster. You know, what you have in your iWatch was in a supercomputer 20 years ago. The amount of computation that's now available is that even the old inefficient algorithms from 20, 30 years ago can actually start to yield reasonable results because it's processed very quickly. The other big advance we've had in recent times, and everyone's kind of got onto the hype of AI, is neural networks. And they were understood as an innovation in the 80s, but they never really worked properly, and we didn't understand why they didn't work properly. There's two reasons now it's emerged. A, we didn't have enough computation, and B, we didn't have enough data to train those networks into understanding the pattern. And now Google was the first company to do this deep learning work, where they got a lot of computers because they've got these massive networks of distributed machines, and were able to train with massive amounts of data. And then the neural networks were able to produce these great real-time classifications. So a lot of things we're actually seeing now, so just about any 2D image can be classified. What is it, who is it, is it a cat or a dog or whatever, and these things which are, but that doesn't actually mean that there's artificial intelligence behind that. All it is, we've got an intelligent detector, so you can actually say that this is a classifier, this is this or that. But then to say what is the intent of that person who's in the image, or what will they do, etc., or is a very different thing. Or even inferring that now we can actually think like humans just because we can do classifications. So this is really just a very intelligent sensor processing thing, which is fantastic in the sense it is a great advance in the technologies. But I think that that's been a real breakthrough, and everyone is now applying that new breakthrough. But then we'll reach a plateau again, because there's only so many problems you can apply that to. So I would say two advances: neural networks, we now understand them, an old innovation, but now understood through better high-end computing, which has become consumerized.
Fantastic. We're nearly out of time. So, and I know you have a 9 o'clock that's starting. I'm going to take one question from our participants that have asked in the Q&A function. This is from Murray Cairns, and he's asking, how did you learn the business skills to transition from scientist, engineer, academic to CEO? And is it obvious how to structure a business entity to launch a new technology?
Hmm. No, I didn't understand. I think I was a professor. I was a good technologist, but good project manager. So those skills I'd learnt at university. And one of the things I'd learned living in Japan, I'd lived there for 3 years, was really the value of teamwork. And Australia's got a very individual culture. A lot of people think I will do this on my own. You can do a lot of things on your own, but actually you get more done when you work with others. And if you get others to follow you, and that's an important skill to have. But just being a demagogue and telling people what to do isn't the way to get things done. You've got to actually learn to listen and actually find out that all the good ideas don't necessarily come from you. They can come from anywhere in your organization, in your team. So you've got to make sure you quickly learn. Just because you're the most senior person or the person who's got the most degrees or got the biggest title doesn't actually mean you've got the best ideas. Best ideas can come from anywhere. And if you're successful, you'll actually make sure that the best ideas are implemented. And when I went into the CEO role at Seeing Machines, I didn't know how to run a business. So I got people to help me. I was very humble and learned that, and didn't know how to write a business plan. But we had a chairman of the board who did know about that and steered us into certain ways, and I was able to learn those skills over time. But always never be assume that you've got the answers or pretend you've got the answers. I think people will respect you more if you say, I don't know how to do that. We better get someone to do that bit. And but of course, hopefully you can contribute in other areas. But if you can't do anything well, then maybe you're not a great leader. But hopefully you've got some strengths, and you can just keep building out on other skills, or get others to help fill the gaps.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Alex. We've got lots of unanswered questions, so we may have to do a round 2 at some point in the future.
Happy to do so.
Really appreciate your time. We've got lots of people in the chat who are thanking you for such an excellent and engaging, insightful and informative session, says Richard Christian. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We'll let you log off now for your 9 o'clock. I'm going to thank all of our attendees and participants for their time this morning as well, and their fantastic questions. If you'd like to keep up to date on I2N programs and events that we've got coming up, please hit up our website at newcastle.edu.au/I2N. And we'll have Startup Stories again the first Wednesday of next month, as well as Join the Dots on the last Wednesday of the month. We're looking this month at adapting to uncertainty using our local startups platform, IC, which is a really great virtual conferencing experience. So don't miss that for Join the Dots later on this month. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.